Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Nut Cracking Squirrel, and I'm going to be sipping on some ginger peach tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you can find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, green oxide, Mars black, deep yellow, burnt sienna, which I'll call rust, fire red, and burnt umber, which I'll call brown. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like to, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that we'll use for sketching later. And then I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a 1/4 inch wide flat bristle brush, and then I have a number 1 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch those up as well if you'd like to. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas even to the piece of chalk. That'll all be in there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we are painting our background. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are yellow, green, brown, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be applying it in a circular type of brush stroke with the tip of my brush. And I will not be washing my brush throughout this process. I'm just going to continually pick up one color or the other color. My goal here is to make this look like an out of focus, just forest of some sort, where this squirrel has just stumbled upon a beautiful stump to create his nut cracking adventure. So I'm just picking up some green paint in through here, and I'm really just going to kind of go around in these kind of chaotic circles for a little while. Then maybe I pick up some brown, intermingle the brown a little bit, something like this. Then maybe I pick up some yellow, go around with some yellow for a little while. So I'm just going to kind of alternate these colors. I just picked up a bit of black, so the black is going to make its way into the background as well, with these kind of dark little spots throughout the forest. Just picked up some green, and you can see I'm just going to kind of keep alternating my colors until I get the entire background colored in. I like to kind of overlap, but what I'm doing by doing it this way is I'm kind of forcing myself to have these real kind of distinct areas of color, and then I'm forcing myself to kind of blend them in a little bit, so that way I don't end up with an unpainted canvas, so to speak, and it will still give me the variety of the colors throughout that background. So in this process, I'm using a good amount of paint so that way I can spread it kind of far, but what I'm trying to avoid doing is getting all of the colors to blend in and have one solid color around the entire painting. So once I kind of got that initial chaos on there, now I can just kind of systematically go through and just kind of fill in my little spots. Of course, I'm using the tip of my brush, which is helping me to get a nice consistent brush stroke throughout the entire painting. And if your paint dries a little bit faster than mine, you can, if you want to, use a tiny bit of water in your paint, or you can thin out your paint a little bit with some liquid medium. I am using a student grade paint, which tends to be more on the fluid side, so it stays moist a little bit longer, and it allows me to kind of keep working it for a little while as it's in its drying process. So you might be working with a more heavy bodied paint that is not going to stay what they call open or wet for as long as mine does. And if that's the case, you could do a couple different things. You could either wait for it to dry and do another layer on top of it, or you can moisten your paint a little bit by either adding a touch of water into it, or you could moisten your canvas in advance. Sometimes that will help to keep that paint in a more fluid state as it is working its way through your canvas. And of course, the next alternative is use more paint on your brush, and that way it will stay nice and wet throughout the process. So I'm just continuing to go through here. You can see the yellow spots are almost looking like little spots of sunshine being added to the equation. You can certainly make yours as light or as dark as you want. I'm making mine more on the darker side, so my beautiful squirrel just kind of emerges from behind or from the middle of that beautiful forest, but you could certainly make yours in whatever tonal value that you would like. Maybe you want to have yours a big blue sky and have it all nice and open air kind of thing, but my little guy, he's tucked away in the woods. He's kind of hiding his cache of food, so maybe the other squirrels aren't going to get it on him, but you can certainly do yours as you see fit. And once you get this done, like I mentioned, you could do a second coat if you want it to look a little bit smoother by doing a second coat. I might even do a second coat depending on how mine dries. I might take a look at it and say, I want it a little bit softer looking, and if I do feel that way, then I will just let it dry for a minute and then just pop a second coat on it. And when you do a second coat, you don't have to worry about getting each spot on top of the last one. You can certainly overlap and intermingle and make them all work together. Again, my goal is just to make it look like it's an out of focus type of forest background, but you could certainly modify and add your, change yours into whatever look that you would like. And then we are going to be using we're going to use our chalk for the next step. So once you've got your background done, you can put your large brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're drawing and painting our large stump. So I'm going to use my chalk, and I didn't tell you this, but I'm also going to use my large brush. But I do recommend before you start this step that you make sure that your canvas is dry. So, this is that time where you can take that extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of, fun fanning method. Let's see, what do I have here? I have some tape I can use for a fanning method. Or you can do as I did and just whip out your blow dryer and get it dry. So we're going to be painting this bottom portion and drawing on top of it. So you'll want to make sure that it's dry before we get there. So I'm going to start with my chalk. I'm going to give you a couple of markers, and then we'll just connect those markers. And by the time we're done, we'll have the shape of a top of a stump. So I'm going to come over on the left-hand side. I'm coming up maybe about a quarter of the way up my canvas, make myself a mark. Then I'm going to travel to the center of my canvas and come up maybe about a half of an inch to an inch, make myself another mark. Then I'm going to go below that till I'm maybe about an inch and a half to 2 inches away from the bottom of my canvas, make myself a mark. And then over on the right hand side, I'm coming in at the bottom, maybe about an inch and a half to 2 inches, make myself a mark. So this represents the top of the stump. We're going to make a big oval for the flat surface of it, and then this is going to be the bottom side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a vertical line from this marker up to, I would say, about a little bit higher than here. So I'm going to just kind of draw, and it doesn't even have to be perfect because we're drawing a stump here. So the less perfect it is, the better. So something like that. And then I'm just going to connect here with a very uneven line to here, and then I'm going to curve it up just a little bit up into here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve this around like this and just meet my mark up here, and you can see how purposely I am doing it uneven, and then I'll make it like that. That's all we're doing for our outline. Then I'm going to take this brush here. I'm going to paint the bottom half with vertical messy stripes like this. I'm going to use black, brown, yellow, and white. So I'm going to take some black and just kind of do some messy lines. I'm going all the way up to my chalk mark. I'm taking some brown, making some messy marks with my brown, and I'm not washing my brush. Just kind of getting these on here, picking up some yellow, getting a little bit of yellow on here, and then I'll take a little bit of white and just kind of, in a messy fashion, just kind of get them to all work together. So you might want it to be lighter or darker than mine. I'm really just going for a rustic kind of deep woods. This has been kind of weathered for a long time. I'm trying not to blend it all too much together. So if you feel that you are blending it a little bit too much, maybe wipe off your brush and just kind of get it to be a little bit on the thinner side. Mine is going nice and gray on me, which is super cool because it really looks very natural that way. I'm just kind of moving my brush up a little top to bottom, and of course you can certainly modify that as it's drying. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and I'm going to do the top surface, which is going to be much brighter. So I'm going to be using brown, tiny bit of black maybe, yellow, and white. So I'm going to do it in kind of a circular type motion. So I'm going to start with some brown paint on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of do it in this oval type of brush stroke. I'm going to put a tiny bit of black paint on my brush just to kind of get some of those grains in the wood, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up some yellow, a little bit of yellow and white, and get this rest of the area just to kind of start talking to each other. And again, I want this top area to be lighter than my side, so I'm not terribly concerned if this gets overly light, because that's going to indicate that there's a lot of sunshine that's happening in our scenery. So I'm cool with it being pretty darn light. And again, I'm just kind of utilizing this circular type brush stroke. You might want to add more brown. You might add, you could even add some of that burnt sienna color to it if you wanted it to look like a richer kind of wood. But being on the messier side, that's what's going to make it look the most natural. Plus, we're going to have a big, huge squirrel on top of it, so it doesn't need to be, the squirrel is definitely going to be the star of the show. So just know that if yours isn't perfect, that's okay. I'm going to do some extra light edges to it over on this right, or on the bottom type of side to it. So I just added a bit more white to my brush and just getting some little edges that are going to just pop out and make it look like, it's been weathered and it's got some age to it and it's got some wrinkles to it like we all do when we age. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my chalk for the next step as well. So once you've got your stump all nice and finessed, and you can just kind of keep wiggling in these colors, and then once you've got it to your desired way, you can put this large brush away, take out your chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our small stump. So we're going to start with our chalk, and we'll end with our medium brush, which is the smaller bristle brush. So I've made myself 4 dots, so I'll tell you where they are. I've got, this one is about, I would say, 1.5 to 2 inches over from the left-hand side. And if you were to say, okay, about halfway in my stump, this way in your main area, and then just go to the left, that would be about where I've got it. And then I'm coming over maybe about 2.5 to 3 inches to the right, and then I'm just going up right above my my stump line, and I'm going to make 2 more. These do not have to be perfectly lined up with these. You can even off-center them a little bit, and then I'm going to connect these with a very uneven line. So I'm going to do this in through here, and then I'll do, maybe this is going to go in through here. The bottom one I'm going to do with a little bit of an arc going in this direction, and then the top one's going to be connected with a little oval. So my oval is going to be something like this. And it doesn't have to be a perfect oval, obviously. Just enough for a nut to fit on it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my medium brush. I'm going to color in the stump part, similar to how I did the bottom. So a little bit of black with some uneven kind of black marks, a little bit of my brown with some uneven brown marks. And of course, I'm not washing my brush throughout this step. I think I need a little bit more black just to kind of make sure I've got enough on those edges so we can see that they are edges. So something like that. Maybe a touch more brown in here, a little bit of yellow, give it some life, a little bit of white. And my trick here, especially on this smaller stump, is I'm not using a ton of paint on my brush, and I'm not using a lot of pressure. So I'm just really going in for an uneven visual effect. We've got a great base underneath it, which is the color from the large stump. And I'm really just looking to give it some good diversity here. So it looks like, again, it's pretty weathered, it's been around for a while, and I can get some light spots in it, which is going to give it some dimension to it. We will, with the top side of it and with the shadow we'll put underneath it later, that will give the visual cues that it is in fact round. But right now I'm just kind of getting some color on there, and then on the top I'm going to use my brown, yellow, and a little bit of white, maybe a touch of black too, but just enough to get this top area on the lighter fashion. And again, this is going to be mostly covered by a big nut, so you don't need to get it perfect. We're just going for something that resembles a stump here. And then we are going to be utilizing, you know what, I think I want to put the shadow underneath it while we're here. So I'm using that same brush. I'm just going to take a little bit of black paint, give myself a touch of a shadow underneath it, just so it looks like it's nice and grounded. And I'll just pull this out a little bit over here on the right hand side, and then we'll use our piece of chalk for the next step. So once you've got your top stump on here and you've done any little finessing that you want to make it look the way that you want it to, so we'll use our actually, we don't even need our chalk. We're going to actually just use our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your stump on here, you can put your medium brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm painting myself a chestnut. So I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors I'm using are brown, rust, yellow, white, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a base coat for the chestnut, and then we will put it in place, and while that's drying, we'll go do a little shadow and we'll have some fun with it. So I have pre-mixed myself my base color right in through here. So how I got to that was I used a little bit of yellow, a little bit of rust, a little bit of brown, and then a touch of white. And kind of almost equal parts of each. And once you spin it all in there, you can see if you want it lighter or darker. We're really just going for a kind of a medium to dark tan type of color. So somewhere in there it works for me. And we're going to be adding highlights and shadows on top of it. So if it's not, again, exactly the same color as mine, that's okay. We're just going for a base coat here. So when I go to paint this on, I'm going to do just a thin layer of it so it dries quickly for me. So I'm going to start the bottom is going to be a little bit up from this edge here. So I'm just going to kind of make myself a little bit of a marker. And then I'm going to go, I would say, about 1.5 inches above my stump and through here. So something like that. And this is an oval type of shape. I don't want it to be wider than here, so I'm going to bring this in maybe about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch. Just give myself a couple of little markers so I don't go too far outside of that. And then as I do this, I'm going to make ripply type of edges. This does not have to be a perfectly round nut. It definitely has some bumps and stuff along the way, so don't feel as if you have to make yours completely of a perfectly round shape. So I'm just kind of getting this on here. And plus our squirrel is going to be holding on to it nice and tight. So there's no need for it to be perfectly round. Even if it was perfectly round, it'd probably roll right off your stump. So, and then I'm just kind of painting it in with a thin coat of paint. So this can dry for me in a quick minute here. And once I've got my shape on, I'm just kind of readjusting my shape a little bit in through there. That's looking pretty good to me. Then I'm going to just wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I want to put a shadow underneath my nut, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown and black, and I'm just kind of going right underneath that nut, maybe a little bit more black so we can really get the essence of a shadow underneath it. And I'm picturing my light source to be up in the left of this whole structure, so this is going to so my shadow is going to be down in the bottom right hand corner of it. And then once you have your shadow on there, then what I'm going to do with this dark color on my brush is I'm going to kind of lay where the creases in this nut are going to go, where it would essentially open if it was, you know, being opened by a regular nutcracker. So I'm going to put a little like seam in it in the center and through here. I think I need a little bit more black on my brush so we can get, there we go. And if you're working on wet paint, if yours hasn't fully dried yet, don't worry about it. That's going to help you make this look a little bit more natural. So I'm putting this uneven kind of seam in the middle of my nut, and then I'm just going to kind of give myself some grooves all along the nut, something like this, because these are kind of bumpy type of nuts a little bit. They're not super bumpy, but they definitely have some bumps to them. So I'm just kind of using that black with a little bit of brown to get some curves of sorts and some little creases throughout the nut. And then once I've got as many as I feel that I want, then I'm going to use that dark color and put a shadow underneath on the nut at the bottom of the nut. So again, just a little bit of brown and or a touch of black so you can get it nice and dark down in through here. And you might have to work it a couple of layers to get this on here so it's in the value that you want. You might need to get it to go a little bit darker or lighter or whatever is visually appealing to you. Then I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put a highlight at the top of it. So wash and dry my brush. So the highlight can be your tan color plus white. And at some points you'll just use white as well. So I'm going to start with the base coat of tan plus white, and this is going to help me to get these little bumps or the elevated pieces of the nut to kind of pop out a little bit more. And then I'll use my white, just the white, in a minute to get a really bright highlight at the tippy top of it. So you can utilize this to make areas stick out a little bit more. Like if you wanted this piece in here to stick out a little bit more, you just add a bit more of the lighter tone within the nut, and that's going to help you to get those pieces to look like they're protruding a bit more than the piece next to them. And then if I want a really bright highlight up at the top, I can just make sure that I've got that white all the way to the edge in some of the area. You don't need to do the whole area, and that's going to give you that three-dimensional look to it. And I'm just bringing this kind of all the way down the side, leaving some of those grooves evident so you can still get the information that it is in fact a rounded type of object. And then you just kind of keep fiddling until you have all of your poofy parts and your shadowy parts in the way that you want. And then we're going to use our chalk for the next step. I think, yeah, our chalk for the next step. So whenever you get done painting your nut and you've got it in the proper dimension that you would like, you can put your small brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're outlining our squirrel body. So I'm going to use my chalk, and we're going to just make some basic shapes, and by the time we're done, we'll just have a nice outline that we can color in. So I'm going to have my squirrel sitting, the body is going to be in through here, the tail is going to go up there, and I'm going to have my head around here with his arms and his legs in appropriate positions. But I'm going to start with a basic shape for the body. So the bottom of the body I'm going to have down in through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming about, I would say maybe 2.5 inches away from my stump, or if this is the center of my canvas from left to right, I'm a little bit over to the left from that. I'm going to make myself a little bit of a dot, and then I'm going to go directly over to the right hand side. And again, if this is the center of my canvas, somewhere in through here, this is about 1/4 of the way to the edge. So something around here, and then you can just loosely connect those two. Then I'm going to go from the center of here, and I'm going to go directly up, maybe a little bit to the left, but up around here. So this is, if this is about halfway up or down my canvas, I'm about 2 inches above the center of my canvas. Once I have that marking in through there, I'm going to connect this dot to here with an arcing line, but it's going to bubble out a little bit further than these points in through here. So I'm going to start up in through here, and as I do this, I'm going to watch down here, make sure that I bubble this out a little bit further than here, and then I'm going to come back in like this. Something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over on the right hand side. You could even start down below if you wanted to, and then just kind of bubble yourself out a little bit more like that, and then just come back up in through here. And again, it doesn't have to be a perfect shape because we're going to be putting a whole bunch of squirrel fur on top of it later, so don't worry if it's not perfect. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a circle for the start of my head. So I'm going to come over from here about 1/2 inch or a little bit to the right of here and up right about here. That's going to represent the bottom portion of my circle. The top portion of my circle I have right about here. So this is maybe about 2 inches above here and over to the left. And then the side of it is going to be maybe, I would say, almost directly above my stump, somewhere in through here. So then I'm going to make myself a circle connecting these. My circle is going to overlap the edge of my, or come close to the edge of that initial shape that I made, something like this. And again, no need for it to be perfect. We're just giving ourselves a basic outline. I'm going to connect this circle to here with a little bit of a scooping type of motion like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself the rest of the shape of the face. So we need to kind of give our little guy a little bit of a nose of sorts. So I'm going to, from this part of my oval, I'm going to come almost straight down, and I'm going to bring it down to almost about the bottom of where this circle is, something like this. And then I'm going to scoop it up like this and give myself another little marking like that. So that's going to represent like the part. If the mouth, we'll say the mouth is going to be there, this is going to be above the mouth, and that's going to be its little nose. And I'm going to give myself some ears. So I'm going to go almost from the center of my circle straight up to the top, give myself a little bit of an ear, something like this and like this. These aren't very tall at all, and they're pretty narrow. And then I'm going to go just to the left of that, give myself another one. Maybe this is the one on the other side, so it's got a little bit different of a shape to it. Something like that. I've got to give myself the arms that are going to be connecting this. So I would say if you come up about halfway between your circle and your stump, somewhere in through here, that's going to give me the bottom part of this back arm like that. Then I'm going to go about halfway between, well, maybe somewhere about here. So about halfway between my circle, somewhere around here. This is going to be the bicep of the squirrel, something like this. It's going to come close towards my my nut, and then I'm going to bring it over like this. We'll draw a couple little fingers, but if you don't necessarily need to chalk them in, but I'm just going to, so you can see where they're going to go, I'm just going to do 3 little bumps over on that side. I think maybe this arm needs to be just a little bit, there we go, just a little bit further down, something like that. And then let's see, what else do we need? Oh, we need some legs. So right about the bottom of here, I'm going to come up maybe about a quarter to a half of an inch. Just give myself a little bit of a line going in through there. This is the bottom part of that foot that's going to go on that side. And then I have if you come about halfway over here, I'm just going to dip this down just a little bit. This is going to be like the bottom part. This will be like the leg, and this is the bottom part of the foot. Come on over here, and then maybe just give myself a couple of what's going to be squirrel toes. And I don't even really need to do much. I'm just kind of marking it for my own visual. I don't even really need to tell myself what the toes are at this point, because we'll be making them with the paint in a minute. And we're not going to do the tail because that's just going to be paint. So that is all we're going to be doing for our outline. We're going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put your your chalk away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting the base coat of the squirrel. So I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm using are rust and brown, and I will always have both of those colors on my brush at the same time. This way it's going to give me kind of a nice variety of shades of this brownish rusty color underneath, and it's going to provide a great base. We are going to be painting over our chalk marks, so the ones that you'll probably lose that I'll walk you through keeping them later or reestablishing them later is this one and this one. So I am not doing anything fancy for my brush stroke. You can spin it around in circles, you can do it in, streaks, whatever you'd like to do is totally fine, because this is just the base coat. We're going to have a whole lot of information on top of it in a little while, so it does not need to be anything perfect. It's going to be see-through, it's going to be streaky, it's not going to be of anything that's beautiful right now, so don't worry about any specific brush stroke at this point. You just want to get the entire areas covered in. Even when you get down to the feet, I'm just going to give myself the little outline in through here, and I'm just going to pull the paint out where those toes are going to be. But again, I'm not concerned about any little detail. I'm just getting the generic type of shape on there. When you get to edges where you think are going to be kind of fluffy, or you want a little bit of fur, like this area down here, instead of doing a straight line, you can just pull the corner of your brush out to give you a little bit of a messy edge in that particular place. This is my other little foot, so I'm just going to go ahead and color it in with my base coat in through there. And then of course every time I reload, I'm reloading with my rust and my brown. This edge here would have a little bit of a fluffy edge, so I'm going to try not to make it so super clean. And then I can go ahead and just paint the rest in. On the arms, they would probably have a pretty smooth coat to them, so I'm not concerned about giving them fluffy edges like I was the other parts of the body. And I'm just going to bring this all the way to my nut. And if you find during this process that, oh, my chalk is a little bit too wide for me, and I want to make, I don't want to go out as far as my chalk, that's okay. Just leave the chalk there, and you can just erase it with a little bit of water later. So my fingers here, I'm just going to put a little dot of the color right on where those little fingers are. And of course we have another hand to contend with, but the other hand's floating in here somewhere. We'll get that established in a little bit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paint the head and the ears. I know that my ears are going to have a little bit of fluffiness to them, so I could start that in this process, but the fluffiness kind of comes up towards the top of those ears, so I'm just kind of pulling it out just a little bit, not a lot. And then I'm just, again, this step is primarily just so you can get that base coat on there. It has really not much of a bigger purpose than that. We just want to establish a nice base tone for our cute little squirrel in through here. And then as I get towards this facial area, I'm going to go a little bit slower just so I can make sure that I keep that shape that I want. So just coming out from my circle a little bit, giving myself my little nose. And I suppose you could certainly use a smaller brush when you get to these littler areas, something like this. There we go. And then we're going to use our large brush for the next step. So once you've got your base coat of your cute little squirrel on here, you can put your medium brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the first layer of our tail. I'm going to use my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are black, brown, and rust. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start by giving myself, I'll call it the shadow area, right along the back of the squirrel. And then I'm going to just kind of build it out with my rust and my brown. So I don't want to overdo it on this step. I just want this to be, I want this tail to be really light and fluffy, as opposed to dense and heavy and dark. So even though I'm doing a dark base to it, I don't need to make solid paint strokes. So I'm going to start with a little bit of black and brown on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to start a little bit up from the bottom of the animal in through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm taking my black and my brown and I'm just kind of lightly rubbing it along the edge, and I'm kind of pulling it in an upward and outward motion. So I put it on and then I'm just kind of pulling it out just a little bit. So my line is pretty clean where it hits the squirrel and soft where it's going farther away from the squirrel. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way up in through here as I come up the back of the neck, something like this. And you can see I didn't reload my brush at all. And if you bump into the squirrel's body, that's totally okay. So now that I've got that area established, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm going to pick up brown and rust at the same time. But again, I don't need a ton, so I just wiped my brush off on my paper towel or on the side of my palette. And now I'm going to start kind of pulling this out even further. But I'm going to maintain control while I'm doing this, so I'm not pulling it out too far. Again, this is going to act as the shadowy area within the tail, this deep part in through here. So I've got this going on in through here, bringing it just a little bit farther than we did that initial layer. And now without washing my brush, I'm just going to pick up rust from here on out. So I just picked up rust on my dirty brush. And now this is where I'm going to start to give the tail the full shape. But as it gets towards the tips of the fluff, it's not going to be really heavy. I'm just going to be using the remnants, kind of thin paint strokes along the edges. So I'm bringing this down in through here, and this is where I'm going to start to form the shape of my tail. So the shape of my tail is kind of going to be in the same curve as the back of my animal. So I'm overlapping these colors, but I'm still kind of pulling them out a bit, and I'm pulling them out in this kind of curved type of brush stroke with it very thin along those edges. And you could even go back and forth like this, wherever your comfort zone is. And I'm curving it along the way of the back of my squirrel, something like this. As soon as I get right into about this region, this is where the tail is going to start to kind of go up and over. So if it makes it easier for you, what you can do is just take this paint and give yourself kind of a little bit of a roadmap going up to the end of the tail. I'm reloading my brush with some rust right now, because this in essence is going to be, if this is like the center of the tail, it will splay out a little bit on either side of this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring some of this in through here, and I'm coming way out here. You can even bring this, you know, almost as far out as you have this area in through here. I'm bringing it just about up to the top of my canvas, something like this. And then as I come along this edge over in through here, I'm kind of changing directions a little bit, bringing it more in a natural way, coming out that what would be the tail itself. So the spine of the tail, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but something like this. And if you don't get yours big enough or fluffy enough in this step, don't worry, because we have another crucial step to go on this tail later. So this again is just that base coat, and then we're going to be switching to our small brush for the next step. So once you've got the base coat of the tail, you can put your large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're painting our eye, our ears, our little nose, and the little mouthy area, I guess. So we're kind of doing the features on the head. So I'm gonna use my small brush. I'll be using black, brown, red, and maybe some rust or yellow, but I'll call out the colors as I'm using them. What I'm going to first do is put my dark areas in place, and then we'll just kind of build some information around them. So I'm going to start with my small brush and black paint. The very first thing I'm going to do is put the shape of my eye in place. So I've pre-marked mine so you can kind of see where I'm headed, but to know where this is going, I'm going to be almost between my two ears and about halfway down my head. That's going to be the upper right hand corner of the eye. And then I'm going to go in a diagonal almost about an inch, and that's going to be the bottom left hand corner of the eye. And then I'm just going to make myself a little bit of like an almond type of shape for the eye, something like this. And of course, that doesn't have to be exactly as mine, but this is a pretty traditional shape for these eyes, but you can, you know, make yours into whatever kind of shape that you would like. And then once I have that, I'm just going to color it in with black paint. I think I'm going to bring this left corner up just a little bit more. Give it a little bit more volume in that corner. Yeah, that looks cute. And of course you can reshape yours as you go as well. And then once I've got that on there, while I have this dark paint on my brush, what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the inside of this ear in through here, but I'm going to pick up some brown with the black. So this ear is going to come into the head a little bit. So if this is the top of the head, you're going to bring this inside of the ear, I would say, you know, a good half of an inch, almost inch. And it doesn't need to be a solid color. This is just the inside furry part of our cute little squirrel ears. So I'm just kind of rubbing this paint in, and when it meets the head in through here, you can just kind of dissipate it out into the neighboring head. I'm going to do the same thing with my bottom part of my mouth. So brown and black is where I'm going. I have the little nose kind of comes in through here, and I'm going to bring this bit of darkness at the bottom of my nose, somewhere in through here. And I'm not doing firm lines. I'm just kind of letting these dark colors be maybe a little firm on the edge, but dissipating into the skin color or the animal color itself. I'm bringing this line almost all the way to where it meets the body in through here, and I'm going to bring it up just a little bit in through here. This is going to represent the little mouth that we got going on in through here, which is not very evident at all, but once we get all of the other information in there, this is just going to be a little afterthought in through here. And then I'm going to just kind of outline the side of the face just so we can understand where this is going to go. So this will be, I guess, somewhere in through here. This is going to be our big cute cheek, our squirrel cheek in through there. And then on this part in through here, what I'm going to do, without washing my brush, I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of red and white. So a little bit of red and white on my brush, just dabbing it on my paper towel, because I want this to just kind of work its way into the fur that we're going to be putting on, but I want it to transition kind of naturally. So a little bit of red and white. You could even, or red and brown, could even put a little bit of white on there. When we lighten up the face, this will all make sense, but right now I'm just trying to establish a way where this dark area will naturally work its way into the face. And then around the eyes, what I'm going to do, I didn't wash my brush, I just picked up a little bit of white, so I have a very dirty brush with a little bit of white, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of information underneath the eye, something like this. This is going to give you that little cute part underneath. I've got a little kind of eyelid up in through here, And of course you could use a little bit of yellow or even maybe a little bit of your nut color. That would give you some nice light color. It doesn't have to be white, white, white. I'm going to bring this down towards this corner of the eye in through here. I'm going to bring up a little bit of light fur up in through here. So I picked up a little bit of that nut color just to give myself diversity in my light colors here. So this coming in through here, maybe a little bit more up in through here. I like these light colors surrounding the eye. And then I'm going to pick up a touch of red and white. I just wiped my brush off on my paper towel to get a little red and white. So this is going to give me a little bit of that natural skin color through, or like that pinkish hue on the inside of those around the eye. And then I'm going to get my eye to take shape here. So I'm just washing my brush off on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up a touch of rust and yellow, just a little bit, to give myself a tiny bit of color within that eye. I don't need a lot, just a little bit more towards the bottom of that eye, maybe a touch more of the yellow. And I'm not using a lot because I want it to just kind of dry on the fly for me. And I know that with the black underneath, it will remain really subtle as it dries. And then once I've got that on there, I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up a little bit of white paint, and I'm going to give myself a sparkle in the eye, but I'm going to stay away from the edge. So I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of a sparkle up in through here, and then I can even pull it down in a couple of areas. And then if I wanted it to look really natural, I just dipped my brush a bit in water so I can make some of this white almost like see-through, like glossy looking, and I just kind of pull it down over a portion of that eye. And then you can just kind of keep fiddling with it. The lightness in the face, will add that as we go through the fur process on the face, but if you want to keep tweaking your little eyes as much as you want to, feel free to do so. And then we're going to be switching to our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got your eye and your nose or your ear established and where your mouth and stuff are going, you can put your small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're adding the shadow areas inside the body of the squirrel and from the squirrel on the stump. So I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are black, brown, white, and probably some of my rust color as well. And I'll just call them out as normal as I get to them. So what we first got to do is establish some areas to work with. So the first area that I'm going to establish is this far arm in through here. So I've got already a little bit of a marking here so you can see how I'm going to do this. I want to separate the body in through here from the arm. So for me, a lot of squirrels have this little bit of a grayish kind of white fur on the underneath their neck and in their belly. So I'm going to put a little of that in through here. So I'm going to put brown and black on my brush to start, and a very, very little bit. So little you can even just kind of dab it on your paper towel. And I'm going to establish myself a little bit of a separation. So I'm going to go from this marker, which is a little bit, you know, in that neck area, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a shadowy type area in through here that's going to separate the body from this inner arm. Then without washing my brush, I'm picking up a teeny bit of white paint. So this is going to give me that dark fur, dark gray kind of fur, which would be white if you saw it in person or if the light was shining on it. So I'm just kind of putting that underneath here a little bit, and I'm just kind of using my brush to pull out the little edges of it. And then in through here, I want this to be the what the body color is. So I don't really want it to be gray. I want it to be more of that rusty color. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush, wash and dry, and I'm going to put rust and brown on my brush, which is exactly what we used for the base coat, but this is going to give it its kind of final layer to it. We'll put a little highlight on the tip of the arm later on, but right now this is just giving me that little bit of darkness that I'm going to want from it being shadowed back here. So a little bit of brown and rust, and you don't even really need a fancy brush stroke, just something that gets it on there. So then I'm gonna have to establish the arm that's gonna come in through here. So if you come directly to the right from where your elbow is, almost, I would say, if this is halfway into your body, just a little to the left of that. And then I'm gonna give myself with black and brown, so a little bit of black and brown on my brush. I'm going to go right from here, and I'm going to give myself kind of a diagonal type of line that's going to be a little bit above here, so maybe about an inch above there. And then what I'm going to do is from this marker in through here, I'm going to bring this down to where my foot in essence is going to be. So this will be maybe about an inch and a half in through here, so a little bit to the right of here, and then just go straight down. And that's going to give us the separation from the big leg that we're going to put on here to this under part of the belly. So I'm going to bring this darkness all in through here, because this is going to be nice and shadowed underneath here. So whatever remnants of the black and the brown that I have on my brush. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of white with the black and the brown, and this is going to give me, in this area here, it's going to give me some of this white fur that's kind of peeking out from the belly area. So I'm just going something like this. I think I'm going to put a little bit more black and brown on my brush to get a little bit more of this emerging from the darkness, so it's not just a solid color. So this is giving me a nice gradient coming out from that belly area. So it's a little bit lighter on the edge and a little bit darker underneath. And I just want to make sure this all looks like it's nice and gradually coming out here. And I'm not using a ton of paint on my brush. I'm really just kind of making sure that I have the right amount so I'm not over blending. I'm going to go ahead and put the similar colors to here. So that's going to be my rust and brown. And I will be again putting a highlight on this area later, which will be with a lighter squirrel color. But right now I'm just kind of adding the darker color on now to get these shadows in place and kind of establish everything that we have here. This back leg in through here is going to be a little bit darker, so I just added a touch of black to my dirty brush to get this this other leg, the far leg, to have its darkness to it, and to just kind of make sure that that is taken care of. And then I need to add a shadow up and through here where the top of the leg is going to meet the arm. So right now this is the bottom part of the arm that's going to be holding the axe. So I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm picking up again black and brown, and this is where the top of my knee is going to go. So this is, again, if you go maybe from this elbow, go about halfway into your canvas, come up a little bit and over. So this is, if this is your mouth, come directly over and just a little bit down. That's going to be the top. It's going to meet this here in a nice natural kind of way. It doesn't have to be perfect, but nice natural. And then I'm going to curve it around just a little bit, coming down in through here. And then from here, I'm going to bring this in an upward direction. This is going to be the back of the arm. So this is going to come right about up in through there. And then I want this to blend in a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of pull it out so I don't have a firm outline to it. And same thing with over here. Just kind of pull it out a little bit so it's not a firm outline. And then I think maybe just a little bit underneath here. So I'm going to put a little bit of rust on my brush, on my dirty brush. Just kind of get these to blend in a little bit. And I'm thinking that's, oh, we need to put the shadow underneath our little squirrel here. So I'm going to just wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up black and brown, and this is going to give me my shadow underneath. So I don't have a lot of paint on my brush. I can always add more, but what I really want to do is just make sure that I have a nice dark area underneath. And this is where I'm going to start to establish those little toes. You can kind of just bring this little shadow up between the toes. I think a squirrel has 4 toes, if if the photos I was looking at were accurate in displaying the toes. I think there's 4. And then as I go towards this area where it's a little bit furrier, I'm going to just kind of bring some of this darkness up into the crevices of the fur. So something like this, and it doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to be doing a whole bunch of fur on top of it. And then I'm going to bring a little bit behind my squirrel, because if we're going with what we did on our stumps, that shadow is going to be cast off to the right a little bit. So something like this. And then I've got to put a little shadow in between the legs that would be cast by the leg and perhaps from the stump itself. So something like that. And of course you can keep fiddling with these, but we're going to be utilizing this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your shadows in place, you can wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing the fur on the main body part. So not the head, we'll do that in a future step, and not the feet. We'll do the feet and the 2 hands. We'll do those in a future step. So just know that I'm avoiding them on purpose right now. So I'm using my medium brush. The colors that I'm going to be using, I might use a little black. I'm on the fence about that, but I might use it to blend a little bit. But I'm definitely going to be using brown, rust, red, yellow, and white. And I have pre-mixed myself another color. So we'll be using the walnut color, the tan that we used, as one of our fur colors. And I've also pre-mixed myself this peachy type of color. This is where the red plays into the equation. So what I did was I took a little yellow, a little rust, a touch of red, and a little white, and mix them together. And that's how I came up with this beautiful peachy color. This is going to act as a wonderful highlight on top of the fur, in addition to the yellow and the white. So I got myself some of that color, and you can make kind of any shade of this that you would like, because squirrels come in different colors too. There's gray squirrels, and there's black squirrels, and there's rust squirrels, so there's all different colors. Oh, I think there's even white squirrels too. They're not from around where I live, but I think ours are mostly this color and black squirrels. We have a lot of cool black squirrels. But anyways, so I'm going to wash my brush now that I just pre-mixed that color, and I'm going to start from the dark and work my way to the light. So I already have established that this is dark under here, this is dark here, and of course, as it goes over towards the tail, that might be the darkest. My lightest areas are going to be the areas that pop out the most. So that's going to be in through here, on the edge of this arm, in through here, and maybe on the part of the back that pops out the most. So I've washed and dried my brush. I'm going to start with some brown and rust and yellow all on my brush at the same time. These are my 3 colors that I'm starting in my dark areas. So I'm going to just kind of establish where I want these to go, and I'm going to be using a directional brush stroke. So that means that every brush stroke that I do, I'm going to be putting in the direction that I feel that fur will be falling. So right now I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the brown and rust to go and make sure I've got this dark side down the back, and make sure that I've got all the way to my tail. So really I'm also just kind of right now making sure that I've got full coverage on some of these areas, because I can still see some of my background through there. So right now I'm just making sure that I've got enough accomplished in through there, making sure that this kind of blends in well with this dark area in through here, and making sure that everything where I want those dark areas have really been established, and we're working our way towards the light. And then as I work my way up this leg, I'm just going to kind of continue in this directional motion, making sure that I've got this paint all nice and on there and through here. So in this area, in the arm, this is probably going to be the trickiest area, because you have the arm in the exterior, or the top part of the arm in through here, and then there's a little forearm in through here. So I'm going to start working my way towards the lighter colors right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of my rust as well as that peachy color, so I can start to establish where those lighter areas are, because I've already got dark on there. Now I'm going to start establishing where the light is. So I know that I have a little bit of a forearm of sorts in through here. So I'm going to just kind of put a little bit of that paint and pull it down. I don't need to pull it all the way down to the bottom because that's going to be a little bit shadowed underneath there. I also know that I'm going to have the hand is going to come in through here, so I don't really need to go too wild in this position or in that spot. And then I'm going to start to add this rust and this peachy color over in through here. And this is one of those steps that less is more. You never need a ton of paint on your brush. You just want to have just enough to get the job done and show that you have that fur, but you don't need to go, you know, and paint every single little piece so it's a solid color, because if you do, then you're gonna, in essence, kind of work over or get rid of all of the work that you did underneath. So this is definitely a less is more kind of step. I'm going to start establishing my lighter area on top of this leg in through here, and this in through here is going to get, again, that directional brush stroke, but I want the viewer to understand that this is kind of curved up in through here. So that's why I'm kind of curving the pieces of the fur as they're making their way down that leg, and I'm overlapping, but again, I'm not covering the whole thing. This peachy color is really making me excited right now, so I'm going to continue on with that, with the peachy color and some rust, and I just added a bit of brown as well to my brush. And again, I'm just kind of getting this back fur on here so it has some texture, it has some dimension to it, and I'm not overdoing it. So I've got the lighter areas involved. Now I'm going to start using some of that walnut color and probably a little bit more yellow and white as well. I'm not washing my brush, and I very rarely wash my brush when I'm doing fur of this nature, when I'm just building it upon each other, because I want all of these colors to speak to each other, and I want them to look like they're not different sections of the fur. It's just the fur being highlighted by the form, the shape of the animal, and or by the light source. So that's why I don't wash my brush. I like to just kind of let these colors speak to one another. And even if I'm working a little bit with wet fur, or wet paint underneath, this will help me to get them to look like they belong together. And I'm just kind of bringing this in through here. This is looking good. I think I'm going to want a little bit more darkness down at the bottom, but you can see how I'm just kind of building my way towards the light. I definitely want to make sure that it's understood what this piece of the animal is. And so for me, I know that it is the knee, and it's going to be popping out the most. I do want to add some of this lighter color onto this back side of this arm in through here. And as I'm building this, you'll notice that every time that I go for a lighter color, I'm in essence kind of painting a smaller section of the animal, because the light is the lightest spot is gonna be concentrated, and it gets smaller and smaller. So that's why as I'm going towards those lighter sections, I'm painting less of the animal. I just am in essence kind of bringing the light out from the darkness. And in through here, I know that this is going to kind of come from the head, so this might have a couple of different directional elements to my paint stroke, or to my brush stroke. I know that this is going to kind of pop out over here because of the way that the body would work, I guess. It'd have a big bump in through here, and I'm just going to kind of keep building the lightness as I'm coming down this back area. I think I'm going to add a bit more of that lighter color in through here just to get that to kind of, whoops, almost just lost my brush there, get a little bit more illuminated. And if you ever get to a spot where you're like, oh, I just did too much, or I didn't do enough, you can always just let it dry for a couple of minutes and then just start building upon it after that. I mean, you don't have to just muscle through something that you weren't quite sure about. Just, you know, just step away for a minute, let it dry, let it do its thing, and see if by the time it dries, you might not need work on it. Sometimes when we're going through these processes, we're not really planning for what's going to happen when it dries, and it always looks a bit different when it dries. So if you don't foresee that, then you might get a little alarmed or startled throughout the process and think that you're doing something wrong, when in essence you just need to wait a minute. And then you'll probably enjoy it much better if you just kind of give it that minute to rest and to fully dry. And you can see my knee is starting to pop out nicely. I think now I'm going to start pulling in a little bit more white, maybe a touch of yellow, and you can, you know, use them together, you can use them separately. You can see I'm really starting to build it towards that lightness, and every time I go to do this, I'm using less and less paint. I don't need a lot at all, just teeny tiny bits, getting these little highlights established. Definitely want this section of the, yeah, there we go. And the highlights, they do it for me. So as I'm building this, it's making me happier and happier. So once I've got this little area in through here, he's almost there. He's speaking to me. He's like, yep, I've got a lot of highlights on here. I've got my little arm is showing through. I've got some stuff on in through here. And anytime, like, I feel like I want a little bit more in through here, so I got to go back into a bit of the darkness. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pull some of the rust and the yellow maybe on my brush, just to get a little bit more happening in through his chest area, because this is the under, you know, this is going to be inside, but I know that I'm going to still see a little bit of it as it, you know, once it dries. So I just want to make sure, or once I put those other objects on top of there, so I just want to make sure that I've got it all in the vicinity that I want. Maybe a couple of lighter pieces on in through here. Oh, and or maybe I'll put a little bit of darkness down at the bottom here, just to make sure that this kind of looks, oh, maybe a little bit more black on my brush. I don't know if I said I was going to use black, but I'm just using a little bit just down at this bottom to get me a little more shadow down here, or a little more dimensional elements down in through here. And of course, this is one of those steps that you can, you know, keep fiddling. But what I would recommend is, before you fiddle too much, let's finish the animal. Let's get all of the other elements onto it. And then if you feel, you know, at that point that you want to go back and make any, you know, more adjustments or tweaks or anything like that, you can certainly feel free to do so. But I think that once we get the head established and you see how the other bits and pieces are going to work with what you've just done on the body, you might be very content in that. So you might not want to fiddle too much, just kind of get the majority of it on here, and then get as much in there as you want. I like painting my animal first. It's tough to stop. That's probably my biggest problem. So we're going to go on to the next step. We're going to be using our small brush. So once you've got this done, you can put this medium brush away, or just fiddle all you want, and then take out your small brush for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the base coat for our axe. I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using black and red paint. So I'm going to start with just the head of the axe. So I put black paint on my brush. I'm going to have the pointy tip of the axe is going to be just to the left of my little nose, and maybe just a little bit higher than my nose. And I'm going to have the bottom part is going to be just to the right of wherever I put my hands or my little fingers, so something like that. And I'm just going to connect these with a curved line. So something like that is going to give me that pointy part. And then the back side of it, I'm going to come just to the right of this and maybe into my nut a little bit. So I would say maybe about 1/2 inch to an inch, maybe somewhere in that works. And then I've got the top of my axe is going to be like, I'm just going to describe it as I do it. So it's going to come down like this, and then it's going to kind of curve around where the pole of it is going to go, like this, and then it's going to come back down in through here, and then just kind of poke out in my nut. So I'm going to do it like this, and I'm going to come up like this. So it's going to look like there's a little piece that's stuck into the nut. And again, if yours doesn't look exactly the same shaped as mine, it's okay. And once we put the little red handle of our axe on, you can certainly modify anything that you need to. And then I'm just going to paint this section in with black paint. So this is going to give you that realistic kind of look to it. I'm going to make sure that it goes all the way to the nut in this area. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush so I can put the red portion on. So wash and dry my brush. I'm going to have the butt end of the axe is going to come where you have this elbow here. I came up the elbow maybe about an inch or so, so it's going to start in through here. I'm going to utilize that shadow that I already established as the bottom portion of the axe. I'm having my axe with a little bit of a bend in it, but you don't have to have yours. You can have yours totally straight. It's up to you. There's all kinds of varieties of axes. So I'm going to start in through here. I'm going to come down a little bit like this, and then back over and just kind of meet this line in through here. And I'm going to have the top part of my axe is going to have the same curve to it. So it's going to be something like this. And then the butt end, the back end could be wider if you wanted it to, or you can just have it the same thickness. Some axes will get a little bit wider as they at the bottom end of this. I'm not quite sure why, but some of them do. So you could certainly make yours wider if you wanted to. And then I'm just going to color this in with solid red. I'm going to put a little piece sticking out the head of the axe on the other side. So once I've got this in here, just make sure I have it exactly where I want it. That's looking pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and just follow this line in through here, come up to here, give myself a little piece of the axe coming out the other end. And then we are going to be utilizing our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put your small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're finishing our little face and our head, except for the whiskers. We'll do those later. I'm gonna use my medium brush. I'm gonna use all the colors that I used on the rest of the fur. So this is gonna be I'll use brown, that peachy color that we made, white, rust, yellow. I'll call them out as I use them. So my thought process here is we're gonna have some fur that's gonna be on the little cheeks, and that will blend into the back of the head and into the back. The fur on the face is just going to be of a softer variety. So instead of using like a directional brush stroke, I'll be using a lot of stippling or dotting. It's going to be pretty light around the nose and the mouth. So I'll be using more of the white and maybe a little bit of grayish kind of color. And then I'll establish the edges of the ears and maybe a little bit of fur over on the other side of the ear. So it'll be light on the top of the head and in the front. It'll be light on this back side of this ear, and of course light down in the front. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start with my stippling areas. So this is going to be kind of just dotting. So I'm going to put a very little bit of brown and a very little bit of white. So stippling is meant to be dots. So if you push really hard or have a lot of paint on your brush, you're not going to get that dotting type of effect. So if you want to be cautious, what you do is you put the paint on your brush and then you just kind of dab it on your paper towel. That's going to keep you in control of the amount of dots that you are putting in that particular area. So I'm going to put a lot of dots around the nose, and you know, I know that I'm going to be doing another, you know, I'm going to probably come back with another layer or two after, you know, I establish this first round of dots, but this is just kind of getting me going. I'm going to start picking up some of my walnut color and maybe a little rust as I go up the face and through here, but I didn't wash my brush, so this is giving me some lighter textured dots as I go up and through here, but I don't want to lose all of that color that I had established underneath, and I also don't want it to look too organized, so I am making sure that I kind of overlap them a little bit. As I get towards the front of the head, I'm going to maybe do that in a little bit more of a directional brush stroke just to establish that it's going up the head a little bit and to get the top lightness on the head in through here. And then maybe I'll go back to my stippling as I'm coming down over around this ear and through here. And again, if you feel like it's too, you know, heavy on the dots, just wipe your brush off on your paper towel. I'm going to go ahead and get this all in through here because this is, again, adding that texture to the face. This is where it's going to start to get into the longer fur, so I'm going to just start that directional kind of brush stroke in through here just to establish the direction that I want that to go in. I'm going to start picking up, I think I want a little bit more darkness in through here underneath, so underneath the lighter fur, so it's going to tell the viewer that there's a little bit of a dip in of sorts underneath the eye. So I just picked up a little bit of brown and black just to, I think I have some of that lighter color on my brush. I'm just washing and drying real quick, make sure that I'm not tainting the area that I want. So a little bit of black and brown just to give myself a bit of a shadow underneath this eye a little bit. There we go. To give a little bit of form underneath this eye so it looks like it's kind of dipping in a bit in through here. And of course, I'm not doing a whole heck of a lot, just making sure that I've got that information on there. If I want there to be a little bit more information underneath where it's going to have the little cheek in through here, I'm still just kind of using that brown and black, just a teeny tiny bit of it, maybe a little bit back here above the eye. Again, this is just adding those little dimensional elements to it, maybe a little bit in through here, maybe a little bit here, just kind of getting those form in there. And now I'm gonna go ahead and start getting those lighter colors. So rust and yellow is where I'm starting with this information over here, just like I did on the body. I started with some rust and some yellow just to get that layer of the iconic colors on there, and then I can start building into those lighter textured type of pieces on top of it. And this one, I want this to really look like it's kind of a separate piece, like it blends in up here, but then in through here it kind of takes on its own direction of the fur. So something like that. Maybe now I'm going to pick up some more of that nut color to give myself a little bit of a highlight, establish the edge of the ear in through here. Yeah, that works. Like that. Maybe a bit more white. That's too much on my brush. There we go. Get a little bit of lightness going on in through there. I think I want a little bit more lightness on this nose. So I'm picking up a bit of that peach and the white just to kind of give myself a bit more vibrancy on that, and that little button nose that he's got. And I'm also going to use this up the side just to make sure that we know that there's a bunch of sunshine on that left hand side of the face. I just picked up a little bit of white to get myself some nice vibrant little pieces of fur up on this left-hand side. And again, if you feel like you've done too much, it's okay. Just kind of let it dry for a minute, and then you can back it off and make it a little bit duller if you want. But sometimes having that bit of brightness really helps to sell the story of where the light is coming from. I'm putting a little bit more brightness in the face right now without taking away all of that underneath color. So again, I'm just kind of getting my way, building my way towards the light. I think I want a little more light coming on this part of the head so it shows a little bit more shape or form to the head. So this is where you can just kind of keep playing with the colors. I just picked up a little bit of rust and my that nut color just to kind of get a little bit more of that lightness in through here. I think I'm going to use this as my highlight color for my ear hair as well. So my nut color plus maybe a little of the peach and a little of the white, just a tiny bit on my brush at the same time. Get myself established these little pieces of the I almost call them feathers, the little pieces of the wispy hair ears that some of these squirrels have. Super long fluffy pieces coming out of the outside of their ear, which is really fun. And they can be really long too, so you can have fun with these little pieces on the top of the ears. They add quite a bit of excitement when they're on the when you look at them on the squirrel. So you can have as much fun with that as you'd like to. And then of course I'm just kind of at this point going back and forth between the colors that I've established as my lighter colors. I'm gonna go with that peach and the nut color for some highlights in through here. And again, I'm not adding a ton of paint to my brush, especially when I'm doing these more directional type of brush strokes, so that way I can continue to just kind of build the layers upon layers, as opposed to just doing one solid paint stroke, because I really want the viewer to understand that this is a fluffy little guy and that he's got, you know, lots of dimension within his fur. I think I'm going to go for a little bit more of the lighter yellow type of version for the fur in through here, just to get this to pop out a little bit more. And I'm going to kind of just keep fiddling here. I know that I want a little bit more lightness in front of the eye as well, like up in the eyebrow. But these are the things that, you know, as you're building your little furry friends here, you can certainly just enjoy the process and step back and say, I want that area to be fluffier. So, you know, come back and just add another layer of the, you know, rusty color or the reddish color, or, you know, your yellows. The lighter toned yellows are going to add more sunshine onto it. If you want this to look a little bit longer, you just pull a couple of longer pieces of fur in through there. If you want it to look darker, you're going to add a little bit more of your black and your brown and stuff in through there. So there's all kinds of ways to bend and tweak and twist this into having a little bit more dimension and more information around the face. Again, I want it kind of softer looking, so I'm going to do a lot of the stippling effect to get that information to just pop out and make the viewer understand what they're seeing and make them understand the shape of this cute little fella. I think it's a fella. I don't know. I've been calling it a male the whole time. I'm not quite sure I know the difference between a male and a female squirrel, but if you do, you can certainly make yours a male or a female. And then I'm going to just kind of add these lighter little speckles to just make sure, again, that I've got, you know, the form and make sure it's as bright as I want. Maybe I've got a tiny bit more lightness above this eye. Whenever you want, if you want the animal to look a little bit cuter, if you can put more emphasis on that eye and get the eye to kind of pop out a little bit, that tends to add a little bit more of the cuteness factor, as opposed to like a dark eye that might be sunken in a little bit. So the more contrast that you have in that eye and getting it to pop out a little bit more, it adds that bit of additional cuteness to it. And you can just kind of keep fiddling. You can see my nose has popped out. I've got this great space for where the front of the face is without it being too invasive. It's just kind of blending into the side of the face. I've got a bright area established on my front forehead, but I feel like I want this area a little bit more of that more iconic kind of color. So I'm just going a little bit more of the vibrant color in through here. There we go. And again, you can do the same thing with yours as you're going through this process. If you want it lighter or darker, or you want one section to have more of that rusty color, just keep tweaking it. Just keep adding those little bits of layers to it. And then we are going to be using, oh, I forgot a little highlight in through here. Let me just put this little highlight on this arm in through here, because we want this little arm, the back arm, to have a little bit of a highlight too. So I just picked up some of my nut color and maybe a little bit of the white as well, just making sure that we didn't forget about that little arm, because I almost did. So just adding that bit of highlight. And then we're going to be utilizing let's go for our big brush for the next step. So once you've got this all done, you can put your medium brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing our tail. So I'm going to be using my large brush, and I'm going to be using all of my fur colors, but my goal here is to get it to look really fluffy and light and being kissed by the sun and all that good stuff up on the top, as well as kind of in the middle of the tail back here and on the tail tips. So I'm going to be adding these layers in kind of a chaotic type of way, but I'm never going to have a lot of paint on my brush, especially as I start building this tail. I'm going to start with my rust color. I don't know if I'm going to use any brown because I already have a nice deep base there, but if I go too light, I can bring back some of the brown. But I'm going to start with some rust and yellow on my brush. So I've got rust and yellow. That's going to be where I start. And I'm just going to kind of start at the bottom and just kind of establish where the additional layer of this tail. And I know again that my paint that I'm using is see-through, so it's going to take on the look of whatever is underneath it until I start using white. The white is going to change the opacity of it and you won't be able to see through the white. So before I start using white, I'm going to get these lighter areas or these more vibrant areas in place before I start using the white. So again, right now I just have rust and yellow on my brush, and I'm using the same direction that I did initially, and you can even bring some out a little bit further than that original footprint of it. And I am using the same direction, but every piece doesn't have to be exactly on top of the other one. You can certainly have them overlapping in a different in a slightly different direction. It doesn't have to be perfect and on top of every single last one, because that wouldn't necessarily make it the most natural looking. So again, just rust and yellow is where I'm starting. I'm getting it all to go all the way to the tippy ends. I'm making it kind of curve a little bit, making it fluff out a bit at the ends like this. And now once I've got that vibrant layer of the rust and the orange, or the rust and the yellow, now what I can start doing is building the lighter, fluffier pieces. I'm thinking of this kind of like blonde hair, that type of color, which is where the two that nut color and that peach color are going to play factors of this, as well as I'll use yellow and white. So I'm going to start right now. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this peachy color and start adding that into the tail as well. And again, as I'm doing this, I'm not using a ton of paint and I'm not pushing it really hard. I'm just kind of utilizing it in the direction that I had that initial footprint in, and I'm not bringing it all the way into the shadow area either. I'm just kind of doing this in addition to it. And if you run into a place where you have too much paint on there and it's all just blending together and is one color and it's not working out for you, let it dry or blow dry it or something so you can work with it. Because if it's too wet and all you're doing is just blending everything together, then that's going to defeat the purpose of getting this to be nice and light and fluffy looking. And you can see, I can still see some of my other colors underneath. I am not painting over them 100%. I'm just utilizing this peachy color to give me another dimension within the tail feathers. And I'm just kind of going all the way around, making this color evident everywhere, but not overdoing it. Now I'm going to start using my walnut, my nut color, without washing my brush. And this is like when I was doing the regular fur. Every time I go to add another layer, I'm adding less and less in that particular section. So I'm just going to kind of add little tiny tidbits in the edge of this tail, maybe bring them in just a little bit more. And you know, you might find that you want to do 76 different layers on this tail. You might really want it to be on the lighter side or on the darker side. So you definitely can steer this into whatever brightness or darkness that you want. But you can see I'm using this more on these little tips. I'm digging the way that it's looking on the tips. So I'm just kind of letting that happen. Maybe I'll put a little bit in through here. I'm definitely going to need some more of that probably rust color and some more of the reddish type of tones throughout this. But this is a building process for me. Sometimes when I'm doing these type of steps, I do go back several times just to make sure that I've got the lightness on there that I want, or the structure that I want. So right now I'm just kind of building my lightness to it, and I'm gonna establish the direction of my fluffy tail as I'm going up here. I'm going to bring it out, I think, a little bit more along these edges, and I don't want it to go straight out. So I definitely want there to be some different curves to it and some different directions to it. I'm going to start putting a little bit of white on my brush right now. I want to start to get some of this lightness up and through here, but I know that I'm going to have to bring some more of the peach and the reddish tones in through the tail itself. But I want to start to establish some of these really bright light pieces in through here. So I just added a bit of white to my brush just to make sure that I'm starting to build this really light area in through here. And I suppose you could even be using, when you get to these smaller, more almost individual looking pieces, you could certainly use your small brush if you wanted there to look like there's individual kind of pieces of the fur. But whenever I look at a squirrel tail, it just there's a million little tiny pieces in there. So that's kind of what I'm trying to go for in this type of effect that I'm doing. And I'm going to get some to come all the way to the end. And again, they don't all have to be in the same direction. I think I'm going to go wipe my brush off on my paper towel. I think I'm going to wash it. I want to get some deeper reddish kind of tones in through here. So I'm going to pick up some of my rust brown and a little bit of red and yellow all on my brush at the same time. I want to get some deep color in through here. So yeah, that's going to work. I know that this is again going to dry a little bit darker because of the base that it's on, but I want the reds of the squirrel tail to definitely be nice and evident. So I'm just putting a little bit deeper tones in right now of that reddish kind of color, making sure that whatever I do in one section, I definitely, again, want it to all look like it belongs together, so I can just continue to add that deep tone into the rest of it as well, and I'll just keep building on top of it. So that's the beauty of this. I often, when I'm doing fur, I'm often thinking about skin, because skin has a million different layers to it, and I think the same thing about fur and hair, because it's just different layers piled on top of each other, and they offer a different purpose. So you know, the ones that are underneath are going to bring, you know, your deep dark tones and those colors into it, but those ones on that lay on the top add your dimension to it. So, you know, they all serve different purposes, and I want to make sure that I'm pulling the colors around to sell that story, that this, you know, has a lot of dimension and depth to it, and that it's all connected. It's all from the same source. So once I've got that on there, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to start, I think I want to add a little bit more of the yellowish kind of highlights to it. So I just washed and dried my brush again. And I think I'm going to go for some of this peachy tone again. But I think I want a little yellow and white too. So you can pre-mix a color. I like using them on my brush at the same time. So I've got peach, yellow, and white all on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to get some of these additional kind of colors, especially up and through here. Yeah, that's bringing the life I want into it. So this is adding a little bit more of those like goldeny kind of tones to it. And again, I'm picturing this to be kind of like flitting and you know, maybe blowing in the wind a little bit. So I'm just kind of adding this as much as I want. And I know that these pieces are pretty long, you know, they would be coming from the base of that tail. So you can certainly make them as, you know, long brush strokes if you wanted to, but I just want to make sure that I don't, you know, overdo it. So that's why sometimes I just go on the slower side. I'm just kind of reloading my brush so my bristles are back in place here. So sometimes my brush gets a little bit too splayed out, so I just kind of reloaded it a little bit so my bristles could get back in control a little bit. And you can, you know, that's just a little trick of mine to get them to be in control, or you could add a tiny bit of water to your brush. And again, I'm just kind of having fun with this, making some little bits of highlights, maybe popping through the tail and through here, maybe a couple on the edges, and, you know, have fun with this. Keep tweaking it. You can certainly, you know, let it dry for a minute, come back and maybe do some additional adjustments on top of it. I'm probably gonna let mine dry and see where it's at, and maybe add or subtract some of the fluff on it. But I do like to kind of let it fester for a little bit and see if there is anything that I want to do to it before I say, okay, I'm totally done, you know. But definitely adding these little bits of layers and getting it all to talk to one another, and, you know, it adds that volume to it, it adds the dimension to it. And I'm just going to kind of keep having fun here because I like these kind of steps. And then once you've got this all done, we're going to switch back to our small brush. So keep fiddling with your tail all you want, and then you can put this large brush away, take out your small brush, I think is what I said, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're painting our hands and our feet. So I'm gonna use my small brush, and I'm gonna use a whole bunch of colors. I'll just call them out as I'm using them. So first I'm gonna start with the fingers on this hand here. I'm using my walnut color. I've got this little guy having 4 fingers, so I'm gonna utilize strategic places so I can just kind of hide some things. So I'm going to put one coming right where the front of the chest is, and I'm just going to do a little bump in through here and just pull it down almost about as far down as the axe is. And then I'm going to put another one next to it with a little bump up here. And this one's going to be a little bit longer than the axe. Something like this. And they're not very wide, just maybe about 1/8 of an inch wide. I'm going to do, oops, I have a little bit of white on my brush. I meant to pick up my walnut color. Then I'm going to do another one in through here. So this one I've got, oh, the knuckle is a little bit taller. And you can have them touching or you can have them separated a little bit, totally up to you. I'm going to have this one a little bit different of a length. And then I have one more that's even taller. This is going to show that he's, you know, holding on to his big old axe here. And this one's going to be a little bit shorter, maybe only coming halfway down that axe. So while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come down to my toes, or my feet. So all I really need to do for the feet is add a little bit of highlighted fur at the top and then separate my toes a little bit. These toes are over on the other side of the stump, so I don't even really need to do anything to those. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my walnut color and kind of establish a little bit where I want my toes to go. And again, I'm not doing much. I'm just I don't even know if I'm anatomically correct on these little toes, but I think that there's 4 in through there, and then I think they're pretty long, so I'm just going to kind of make that a little long in there, and then I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on the fur over in through here. So I just picked up some of my walnut color with a little bit of the peach, and I'm just going to get a little bit of a highlight on here, and then maybe just kind of pull it down like this, just to show that there's a little bit of fur over here. And of course you could certainly utilize any other of your fur colors that you would like. I'm just trying to give it the essence of the rest of the colors of the fur. On this other leg, again, I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of a highlight up at the top. That leg's going to be kind of hidden, so I just want to make sure that it has a gradient coming over on this side. So I just picked up some rust and brown to make sure it just kind of fades into the darkness over in through here. And then I'm going to do these little fingers in through here. I'm going to put toes on, or the toenails, in a second, but first I want to just establish my highlights to them. So I'm going to put little highlights over just on the edge over in through here. We've already got the finger in place, so just adding a little edge to it in through there. I think I'm only going to see 3 fingers in through there. And then I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to put some fingernails on. So I'm going to put I put a little bit of black paint on my brush, and all I'm really going to do is just kind of put these pretty long black fingernails coming out, and they can come out in these different angles. They don't all have to come out at the same angle, because this is a wild little creature. I don't think he's been to the salon to have his nails manicured in recently, so they're going to be kind of raggly kind of nails in through here. So I'm just bringing this back up the toe a little bit so you can see some of the skin along the sides of it, something like that. And then over here I've got maybe just the little tips touching the nut, because he's holding on with his fingernails, I'm assuming. So something like that. And then maybe this one is kind of down the side like that. Once I've got that, I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to add a little highlight. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to put a little shadow in between these fingers first. So I just picked up a little bit more black and brown to get a little bit of shadow in between these fingers in through here, just so they've got a little bit of dimension to them. And then maybe a little bit of my rust and brown, just to give them a little bit more dimension than just that solid color. Yeah, there we go. That does it. And then I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white to do a little highlight on my fingernails. So I don't want to cover up all the black. I'm really just going to kind of do a quick little swipe on them, and if it goes too much, I can always just bring back some of the black. But I'm just doing a little kind of curved swipe to tell the viewer that there is a little bit of a highlight and that they're curved. And these guys over here, just gonna, hopefully my hand won't go too much in the way, but something like that and like that and like that. And then we're gonna use our, oh, let me put a little highlight on these fingers and through here too. So I just picked up a white with a little bit of that nut color just to give you a little bit of a highlight on the top of those fingers. And then we're gonna use this same brush for the next step, so you can just fiddle and do any little adjustments that you might want. Just putting a little more color in those toes. And then again, I will be using this same brush for the next step, so you can just get ready. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're finishing our axe. So I'm gonna use my small brush. I am using black, white, red, and I might use some of that yellow or peach color, but I'll let you know if I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna do my axe part first. I'm loading my brush with red and black, or the red, I'm doing the axe, but I'm gonna do the handle part first. I just put red and black on my brush at the same time because I'm putting a shadow down at the bottom portion of my handle like this. So just red and black is going to get that on there. Making sure I do it in the little front part as well. And then I'm wiping my brush off on my paper towel, reloading with just red paint to make sure that these two kind of blend together. So I just kind of put red paint on my brush, make sure these blend in together, and then I will put a highlight on the top of it. Make sure I get back here too. That already looks kind of like it's in the shadow anyways. So then I'm going to wash my brush and dry it, and I'm going to start with white and just kind of establish where I want this bright highlight to go, somewhere in through there. And without washing my brush, I'm picking up some red and just kind of getting that to blend in a bit. I'm not going to do much with the highlight. I just want the viewer to know that it is in fact lighter on the top and darker at the bottom. That's going to give it the three-dimensional element. If this went too pink on you, you could certainly use some of that peach color to get it to look more like a light red as opposed to a pink type of color, but I'm digging the way that mine is looking, so I think I'm just gonna roll with it and get my little tip with a little bit of a highlight right on the end of it. There we go, making sure that we carry that highlight all the way through. Then I'm gonna just wash and dry my brush, and I'm gonna do my highlights on my axe part. So this, I don't know how they make them, but this metal part is it kind of takes on the same shape as the handle. So I have black and white on my brush right now, and I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight in through here. And then what I do is I just pick up a tiny bit of black paint and get it to blend in with the bottom portion of that particular section. So I'm just really kind of taking it and making it a little bit brighter at the top and duller at the bottom. And then I'm going to make this section down in through here have a little bit of gray on it to make it look like it is of the shiny sort. I'm just putting a little bit of gray on here. I don't want to take away all of the black, but I do want there to look like there's some sort of shape to it. So I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on the front. I just put a touch of white on my brush, something like that, but you can certainly blend it in a little bit. Just picked up a little bit of black. So I'm in essence kind of putting a highlight on the front of the axe. I'm making part of the interior a little bit on the gray side, and then I'm making sure that I have that established section that kind of pops out a little bit. So I just put that bright part on the front of this, picking up a little bit more black to get this to blend in a bit. There we go. And then I think I want a touch more highlight right there. We go there. And then I want to put a shadow on my nut, indicating that the axe is casting a shadow on it. So I just have a little bit of I didn't say I was going to use brown, but I'm using brown and black. And I'm going to, from where the tip of the axe kind of sticks out here, I'm going to give myself like a little bit of a curved shadow coming out of there. And if you want it to look, you know, more like the axe pops out a little bit more, you could certainly add a touch of a lighter spot at the end of it where it kind of curves here. That will give you a little bit more information for the viewer to digest on it. And then we are going to be using the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your axe finished here, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I'm painting some whiskers. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to start with some black dots and then I'll move my way into the light whiskers, which I'll probably be just using some of my light colors for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some watered down black paint. So I'm going to just dip my brush in water so my bristles are wet, and then I take it and put it in my black paint, spin it around on the side so it's nice and thin. And then I have a nice pointy tip with not too much black paint on it. And I'm going to have these whiskers just kind of coming out of this little side of the face. So I'm just making some really tiny little black polka dots. And if you make too many or they're too dark for you, you can certainly dull them down with some little white dots if you want to. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my small brush. I will be using, I think I'm going to use maybe just my walnut color and a little bit of white, but I really want these to be light and see-through, but I don't necessarily need them to be white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have both of those colors, but I'm also going to have water on my brush. So that way my brush again holds the moisture and allows me to have a nice slender line. And I like to kind of go fast so I can have a fluid motion. You might want a smaller brush. You might, you know, want to practice before you do it. I'm going to do a couple coming out of that left-hand side. Not very many. I might only do like 2 or 3. And I know that they can come out in different directions. So I'm just going to kind of do something like that. And maybe another one coming in through here. And one of my tricks, if I find that it's too wide, what I can do while it's wet is I take another brush, a clean brush, put some water on it, and I can almost just kind of thin it out as it's drying. So you can do this method, or that brush isn't firm enough for me, or you can use a little bit of black paint. You can use a contrasting color to make it so it's not so visible or so thick looking. So once you've got the ones on that side, then I'm just going to move over to this side and I'm going to use that same color combination with a little bit of water on my brush. And I want these to look pretty, you know, natural and chaotic. So I'm just going to kind of start and just kind of pull them out. I'll have maybe one coming down in through here, maybe one in through here. And I'm not doing too many. Maybe a couple coming off the front little area in through here. And if you wanted them to look more visible, if you're doing this and you're like, that's just not visible enough, then just pick up a tiny bit of watered down white paint and you can add a little highlight to them without having to go full on and doing the whole thing. So if they're, you know, not light enough, add a tiny bit of white. If they're too vibrant, they can cross over one another too. So feel free to make some going in front of another one. That makes them look even more natural. And then we have one tiny little step left to go with that small brush. So when you're all set, you can just put the small, wash and dry the small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I think I'm going to sign this one in the bottom left. I'm using my small brush. I am using black paint. I sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like to be your identifying mark is totally fine. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a really adorable little squirrel, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.